yangu wasenesi mwakire mzuzeha sana nenda finira chechemekwe uo yangu wasenesi mwakire mzuzeha sana nenda finira chechemekwe uo yangu wasenesi mwakire mzuzeha sana nenda finira chechemekwe Bageri.
Tumkoko chako erenga makonya miel formula onge miela miela karchendi tumkoko chako erenga makonya miel kikiluor formula onge angoma moni miel angoma moni dunyo angoma moni yengo angoma moni dusofa Nyona miela to miel marito wat to miel maloso wach formula onge miela katieni formula onge angoma moni miel angoma moni dunyo angoma moni yengo angoma moni dusofa miela unge unye Formula unge Miela miela katieri Formula unge Formula unge Formula unge Miela miela katieri Formula unge Angoma moni angoma moni miel angoma moni angoma moni dunyo angoma moni angoma moni yego angoma moni duso miela miela wanwa miela 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 wanwa miela 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 wanwa miela miela wanwa miela wanwa miela wanwa miela miela wanwa yenge wanwa tunzela wanwa dunye miela 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 wanwa miela miela wanwa yenge wanwa tunze wanwa dunye miela 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 formula ube wanwa tunze miela miela dunye formula ube wanwa tunze miela miela dunye miela miela katiri formula ube
Nguo yangu wasenezi mwakire mzuzeha sana nenda finira chechemekwe. Nguo yangu wasenezi mwakire mzuzeha sana nenda finira chechemekwe. Nguo yangu wasenezi mwakire mzuzeha sana nenda finira chechemekwe. Bageri. Nguo yangu
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's broadcast. We are having a, a whole lot of speakers. We're having three amazing speakers tonight. Our first speaker is going to be Diana Kinyua, and then we're going to have Hudson Alaconia and later on Luco Kello. So stay tuned for the rest of the night. So for now, I want to introduce you to Pint of Science. I want to introduce you to Pint of Science in Kenya. Okay, so here we go. Uh, okay, great. So great. So Pint of Science is an annual festival that takes place in so many countries. This year we're having some of our countries participating in the online event. So So today we have the second day of Pint of Science. Yesterday was an amazing time. Myself, I was talking about indigenous people and biodiversity. Today we have uh, three speakers, and we're going to have the first speaker talking about antimicrobial resistance. That is Diana Kinyua. And so about Pint of Science. Pint of Science is a worldwide festival, and it takes place in relaxed pubs and cafes, and it's run by volunteers, and it's all for the purpose of engaging science exchange. So we have. Last year we had over 140 attendees globally, and we also have 2,886 evenings, 397 cities, and 24 countries until last year, 2019. And so the concept of Pint of Science is that it happens in bars, pubs, cafes, and public places. And we have amazing speakers. These are researchers and scientists who share their research with the public, and the public is made up of people who are not necessarily well acquainted with science, and so we have 6 themes. We have our body, and then we also have about technology. We also have our society. We have our planet. We have atoms and galaxies. Yeah, and we also have all that is about the mind, and it is run by amazing volunteers. For instance, in Kenya, we have a number of about 10 volunteers currently, and some of them you're gonna see them. Including Stephanie's joining us tonight and will be my co-MC for the night. And tomorrow we have the great quiz, which we're gonna have games. And stay tuned. Come tomorrow and see what we got. And so what happens is that Pint of Science happens in simultaneously in multiple cities and countries. And so right now we're gonna have we have Pint of Science in UK, Pint of Science in France happening, Pint of Science in the US, and so and so many other countries that are having the Pint of Science going on right now. And you're free to look at other Pint of Science countries online on social media, because most of the happenings or the events are happening online this time around due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which limits or has implications on social gathering. Yes, so Point 19, as you can see on the map, we have so many in the North America, South America, Asia, and Australia, and Africa. Yeah, so we're glad to be part of the Pint of Science Global, and uh, and so these are the Pint of Science new countries, including Argentina, Austria, Croatia, Hungary, Kenya, and Norway. Great, and so I would like to uh, introduce to you Diana Quino next. Today, she's going to be talking to us about antimicrobial resistance. And just before Diana Quino comes on stage, we're going to enjoy the Afro dance again once more. And yeah, and I'll welcome Diana Quino. Thank you. Thank you and welcome back. Okay, great. So I'm inviting Diana on board. Diana, you're welcome. It's great to have you. Great.
You can
Great.
hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you. Great. So
So,
Diana is okay, so
So, good evening. My name is Diana, as you've been told. I'm Diana Kenya. I have a degree in biomedical science from Egerton University, and at, at the moment, I'm an MSc student still at Egerton University. So, it's an honor to be here today, where I'll be talking to us about antimicrobial resistance in bacterial pathogens. I think that it is important that this platform is here because most of the times we find that in as much as scientists are carrying out research, but the public does not know what is going on, you will find that no matter how much they discover, it is just going to sit in journals, and so the public won't benefit very much from it. But if the public is able to know what is happening and also gain certain ideas from what the scientists tell them they are doing, it will be possible to even make the research being done beneficial. So today I'm going to talk about antimicrobial resistance, and I'd like to share my screen with you. I'm not sure if you can see my screen. Okay, so as I said, today I'd like to share with us about antimicrobial resistance in bacterial pathogens. And the reason why I decided to specialize on bacterial pathogens, it's because generally when we talk about antimicrobial resistance, it can apply to viruses, it can also apply to protozoa, protozoa such as Plasmodium, but I'd like to focus on bacterial pathogens. So to begin with, bacteria they are found everywhere. Like even on your skin, there is bacteria. Inside your body, we have bacteria, and another characteristic of bacteria is that they are microscopic, meaning that we cannot see them with our naked eyes. We need to use a microscope. Additionally, they are single-celled organisms, and as you can see on your screen, it's just one bacteria appears as just one cell. So when there is a bacterial population, there will be many cells such as the one that we see here. And also it is important to note that we have both good bacteria and we have bad bacteria. An example of good bacteria is, for example, probiotics. For example, probiotics. And a good example is lactobacillus. And these probiotics, they are found mostly in the gastrointestinal tract, where they help the body to digest the food that we eat, and also they help the body to absorb the nutrients from this food that we eat. And these lactobacilli, they can be found in the food that we eat. For example, when you take yogurt, it contains lactobacilli, but we also have bad bacteria, and these bad bacteria are the ones that cause diseases or illnesses. And a good example of this is, for example, the bacteria that cause pneumonia, typhoid. We also have others that cause another one that causes a disease called chlamydia, which when these bacteria they cause diseases, they tend to be very serious. For example, in some of them they might cause death, and chlamydia it can cause blindness. So it is important that we differentiate between the bacteria that is beneficial to us and bacteria that is harmful to us. And so it's since today I'll be talking about antimicrobial resistance, it is important to understand some basic definitions. A good definition is an antimicrobial, and as I said earlier, when we talk about microbes, we can be talking about bacteria, fungi, parasites like the one that cause malaria, and also viruses that cause COVID-19. But and the drugs that are used to kill or stop the growth of these microorganisms, for example, in our bodies, they are referred to as antimicrobials. And since there are different types of microorganisms, we are going to focus on the ones that target bacteria. So an example of this is antiseptics. So antiseptics, they are the ones that are used to clean our wounds. For example, when you get cut and you don't want to get sick, you can use an antiseptic to clean your wound. And the most common one is, for example, hydrogen peroxide. No, hydrogen peroxide, yeah. And we also have disinfectants that we can use to clean surfaces. For example, if in the lab, most of the time they use ethanol, which is a good disinfectant, and another type of antimicrobial is the antibiotic. This one is mostly the one that when you go to the hospital and you're sick with a bacterial infection, it's the one that the doctor is going to tell you to go and take it. And a good example of this one is amoxicillin and penicillin, and okay, there are many. And okay, the important thing to note here is that these antimicrobials, and specifically today antibiotics, what they do is they are either going to prevent the growth of that bacteria. For example, they can slow down the growth, and there are also others that are going to fully kill the bacteria. So after we have known what antibiotics do, it is okay, how do they help us? Because in as much as we have many of them, it is also important to know why do we use them. And commonly the antibiotics are said to underpin modern medicine. This is because most of the time anything that goes on in medicine, we rely on antibiotics. And a good example of how we can use antibiotics, it's because it's for example when surgeons are performing surgery, they need to use antibiotics to prevent infections. And that's why you see most of them disinfecting, they have to disinfect themselves before they can get into the operation room. And also, antibiotics are also important because after someone has been operated on, they have to be given antibiotics to ensure that they do not catch, they do not get these bacterial infections. And to underline this, I'd like to give an example that long time ago, before antimicrobials were okay, they were developed, something like, okay, not like that. Before we found out about, we discovered antimicrobials. If someone was cut, maybe when they were doing their work, and maybe the wound got infected with something like staphylococcus aureus, most of which is a blood infection. Most of the times you found that these patients ended up dying, and if they recovered, the recovery was very low. So when we discovered antibiotics, they enabled us to prevent infections that will occur after surgery. And another area where we use antibiotics is in agriculture. Though most of the time they have been used wrongly, because you find that these manufacturers of animal feeds, they tend to put to incorporate the antibiotics in the food, and especially food that is given to fish. So the reason why they do this is because these antibiotics promote the growth of the fish and also generally other livestock such as pig. But that is a wrong use of antibiotics. So as I said before, antibiotics can also be used to prevent sepsis and blood infections following after someone has been injured. Another important use of antibiotics is we use them for people whose immune system is suppressed. And an example of these people is cancer patients, because when they are undergoing chemotherapy and radiotherapy, most of the time you find that the immunity and the immune cells of these people, they are mostly eliminated. So to prevent them from suffering from bacterial infections, it is important that we use antibiotics. And also they are used to prevent infections in people living with HIV and AIDS. Another good example of how we use antibiotics is to prevent infections following, for example, cesarean sections, and also we can use them to prevent infections that pregnancy in when Alexander Fleming was receiving the Nobel Peace Prize in 1945 for the discovery of penicillin. He predicted that if in any instance that we used the penicillin wrongly, it will the bacteria, they will end up becoming resistant to penicillin. And he gave an example that, imagine, let's say for example, the father in a certain home, he's suffering from a strep throat, which is caused by streptococci bacteria. Then he goes to the nearest shop or chemist and he buys penicillin. But what he does is that he does not use this penicillin according to the prescription. So for example, he uses penicillin in a small amount such that the penicillin won't clear away the streptococci bacteria. What will happen is that this bacteria might spread to, for example, the wife. And okay, before sorry. So after the man has used the penicillin wrongly, okay, in small doses that are unable to clear the streptococci bacteria, what is going to happen is that this man has taught the the streptococci bacteria how to resist the penicillin. And in another instance, this streptococci bacteria might spread to the wife and it might cause another infection in the wife. But since at first the bacteria was made resistant, what will happen is that the wife is now carrying the resistant strain of streptococci, and it might spread even to their children. And it is important to note that after it becomes resistant, it will be very difficult even when the mother goes to the hospital to get treated with penicillin. So that's how Fleming wonders about antibiotic resistance. So the reason why I chose to talk about bacterial pathogens, microbial resistance in bacterial pathogens, it's because of late scientists have discovered that there is emergence of drug-resistant infections. Okay, going by the example that I've given you, for example, a patient goes to the hospital and maybe the streptococci bacteria, they have a resistant strain. So, and the cause, what has been causing these drug-resistant infections is over prescription of antibiotics. For example, nowadays when you go to hospital, it's very difficult for you to live without being prescribed, for example, amoxicillin. Okay, okay. When you look at most prescriptions, no matter which disease or infection you're suffering from, you'll find that you've been prescribed an antibiotic. And okay, another reason why there are drug-resistant infections is because nowadays you can go to a chemist and you tell the person in the chemist you want amoxicillin, and they are just going to give you, maybe even they will not tell you how you're supposed to take it, or even if they tell you how you're supposed to take it, when you go at home you say, I am going to take this drug until when I feel I am okay. And that is going to cause antimicrobial resistance, because ideally you're supposed to take the drug according to prescription, because the prescriptions are mostly guided by research. So they know that when you're suffering from a certain infection, if you take a certain drug for given a certain period of time, the infection will be clear. But if you take it for an amount of time that is not for example, you're supposed to take it for 7 days, but you take it for 3 days, and because you stop because you feel that you're not sick anymore, what is going to happen is that you have not cleared the bacteria completely, so the remaining bacteria is going to become resistant. Okay, another reason why we have bacteria strains that are resistant to the antibiotics that we have today, it's because okay, as you all know, when you're suffering from cold or flu, there are various causes of flu. It can be a bacterial flu or it can be a viral flu. But when you go to the hospital, since they don't have the correct diagnostic equipment to determine whether you're suffering from flu that is caused by a virus or one that is caused by a bacteria. You'll find that most of the time they will give you antibiotics to treat the bacterial disease, but in that instance, maybe you may be suffering from a viral disease. So what will happen is that the antibiotic that you have been given is going to affect the good bacteria that we said is living in your body, and it might even cause them to become resistant. And another reason is because, for example, the bacteria that causes strep that it's called streptococcus. So you might be suffering from the strain that is resistant to the drug, and the doctor is going to give you the same drug to which the antibiotic is the bacteria is resistant to, and this is going to cause the resistance to continue. And as I've said before, when you're told by the doctor to take this drug for 7 days, and then you take it for 3 days, you're also going to cause antimicrobial resistance. And the biggest contributor to antimicrobial resistance, it's mostly agriculture and mostly fish farming, where, as I said before, you find that farmers, they use antibiotics and maybe in food to increase the growth of their livestock, so that they can get into the market more faster than in the instance where they don't use the antibiotics. Another reason why we have antimicrobial resistance, it's because in hospitals, maybe the infection control policies that are used by the hospital, they are not good enough to prevent rise of bacteria that are resistant. And also when it comes to hygiene and sanitation, for example, you go to the latrine and when you come out, you don't clean your hands. And maybe, for example, when you're cooking your food, you don't clean the food. For example, vegetables, you don't clean them first. If there were, as we said before, there are bacteria even on food. So for example, if the vegetables, they had bacteria that is resistant, when you take in that food, it is also going to cause you to suffer from bacteria that is resistant to infections. Okay, another reason why antimicrobial resistance is spreading really fast nowadays, it's because, as you can see from the figure, from around 1990 until right now, we have not discovered any new type of antibiotics. Before, in the early 1940s, 50s, 60s, that's when there was discovery of most antibiotics. But since nowadays, okay, the ones that were discovered long time ago, we find that the bacteria have already started becoming resistant, and what we are supposed to do is that we are supposed to continue discovering new antibiotics, so that when bacteria become resistant to a certain antibiotic, we can replace them with the new antibiotics that we're discovering. But since we are not discovering new antibiotics, it becomes a problem, which is going to affect us later in life. It is also important to note how bacteria, they become resistant to antibiotics. As I said before, when And when you give, for example, when you take antibiotics and you're suffering from a bacterial infection, what the antibiotic is going to do is either going to kill the bacteria entirely, or it can stop the growth of the bacteria. And this is what, when this happens, that's when we say that you have been cured of that bacterial infection. But in the instance that, for example, we have misused the antibiotics, what happens is that they become resistant. And one way in which they become resistant is when you take the drug, it's supposed to go in through the the cell membrane or the covering of the bacteria, but they might become resistant in that they won't allow the drug to penetrate them. That is one way in which they can become resistant. Another way they can become resistant is that their DNA can undergo certain mutations that are going to prevent the drug from acting on the bacteria. And another way is that the the bacteria itself, it might modify it might modify modify the drug in such a way that, for example, if the drug is meant to bind onto a certain molecule on the surface of the bacteria, when the bacteria might modify the drug in such a way that the drug cannot bind to the surface of the bacteria, so it ends up becoming resistant to the drug. And also you find that in some cases the bacteria, they mutate in a way that when the drug gets into the cell of the bacteria, instead of staying there and being broken down into a form that can kill the bacteria, what happens is that the bacteria is going to develop ways in which it's going to force the drug out once again. And also, as I said, maybe the target of the drug is found on the surface of the bacteria, for example. You might find that the bacteria is going to produce many targets. And since the bacteria is taken, the antibiotic is in a certain quantity, and the bacteria start producing very many targets on its surface for this bacteria, what is going to happen is that for this antibiotic, what happens is that even if you use the antibiotic, since we have many targets, it won't be effective. Okay, so research has been done, and we have seen incidences of when we are using a certain antibiotic and it's not doing the work that it's supposed to do, and this proves that there is antimicrobial resistance. For example, in Kenya, we find, okay, in as much as there is evidence of antimicrobial resistance in Kenya, there isn't enough data to support this because we haven't been doing a lot of surveillance to know the extent to which the resistance is occurring. But from previous research, we see that the bacteria that causes cholera, which is referred to as Vibrio cholerae, it has been proven to be resistant to certain antibiotics that are used against it. For example, ciprofloxacin, tetracycline, ampicillin, erythromycin. So what happens is that if for example, there is an outbreak of cholera, and previously we were using these drugs to treat these patients of cholera, what will happen after resistance has occurred is that in as much as these drugs are given to this patient, there is nothing that is going to happen. Okay, the patients won't get cured. Okay, we have also seen resistance in cases of people suffering from typhoid, which is caused by Salmonella typhimurium. So when this before, if these patients were given drugs such as ampicillin or chloramphenicol, the patients will get cured. But since now the strains have become resistant, in as much as you give these patients the drugs, they won't have any effect on them. And worldwide, other bacteria that have been seen to be to show instances of resistances. For example, Helicobacter pylori, the one that causes ulcers in most instances. We also have Neisseria gonorrhea, which causes gonorrhea, and it has also been seen to be resistant. And we also have Shigella. Shigella causes diarrhea, and there is evidence to show that certain strains of Shigella nowadays they do not respond to fluoroquinolones. So, okay, as we've seen that this is a problem that is happening of antimicrobial resistance. So, okay, in an instance that we say that we don't care that there is something known as antimicrobial resistance, there is a lot that is going to happen. And an example of this is since as I said, when a certain bacteria becomes resistant to certain antibiotics, in as much as you use that drug to fight that bacteria, it won't cause any effect. It won't affect the bacteria in any way. So what will happen is that there will be treatment failure, and when the treatment fails is we will suffer from chronic bacterial infections, and we might have to resort to traditional methods of preventing infections. For example, we might have to do amputations for people suffering from, for example, if you have a bacterial infections on your foot, you might have to amputate your foot to prevent it from spreading to the rest of your body. And we find that, okay, another way that we might be forced to do is we might use isolation, and we see that these two strategies are not very effective when it comes to dealing with bacterial infection. Another consequence of antimicrobial resistance is that there will be many cases of morbidity. This might be a result of, for example, disability. For example, let's say you've been amputated, and also the mortality, meaning that more people are going to die from bacterial infections. As of now, it is estimated that about 700,000 people die per year due to antibiotic resistance. And if we don't deal with antimicrobial resistance, in about by the time we reach 2050, about 10 million people will be dying every year from antibiotic resistance. Another consequence is that you might relapse from the infections that you're suffering from. For example, if you're suffering from typhoid, you will find that you're going to suffer from it more times as compared to when the antibiotic is effective. And okay, another consequence of antimicrobial resistance is that since the most diseases are going to become chronic, you'll find that most people are going to stay in hospitals. Maybe they will in the ICU, where they will require expensive equipment to ensure that they stay alive, and also they are also going to stay longer in hospitals. And when you stay in hospitals, it means that you also have to use a lot of antibiotics to prevent infections that can be gotten from the hospitals. And generally, we are going to use a lot of funds to take care of these people, funds that we can direct elsewhere. So it's going to have a financial effect on us. And finally, it's also going to reduce our productivity, because most of us are going to be saying we are sick maybe all the time, and maybe some of us are going to be amputated, some are going to be in isolation. So compared to when antibiotics are effective, you'll find that the productivity is not the same. So to to deal with this problem of antimicrobial resistance, it is important that we bring we each of us plays their role, because there are different levels of how we can control this antimicrobial resistance, and strategies that are used to reduce instances of antimicrobial resistance is what is generally known as antibiotic stewardship. And in antibiotic stewardship, there are various people who are going to play parts. For example, there is something that you have to do for yourself as an individual. You can also do it for others, but there is also something that our doctors, our nurses are supposed to do. There is also, as I said, antibiotic resistance also stems from agriculture. There is something that those people in agriculture are supposed to do, and also the government. There are certain things that it's required to do to help in curbing antibiotic resistance. So, for example, as a person, one thing that you can do is that you can stop buying antibiotics over the counter. When you feel that you're sick and you Google your symptoms and you find out, for example, you're suffering from staphylococcus aureus, you should stop going to the chemist and telling them to give you the drug. Just go to the hospital and tell the doctor, and they're going to help you. Another way that as an individual you can help reduce antibiotic resistance is when you're given a dose, ensure that you complete the dose. Most of the times you find that as Africans, when you're given drugs, you go and you take for 3 days, and then they remain. You're going to put them in the cupboard, and then maybe in another year when you get sick, you'll say, hey, and I was given a certain drug, I can use it. Or maybe someone in your family gets sick, and you remember that you have that antibiotic, you go and give them. You should not do that. First, you should complete your dose. If it is for 7 days, ensure that you take it for 7 days. And if another person gets sick, ensure that you don't share. That person is also supposed to go to the hospital and get their own prescription, because maybe they are not suffering from the same infection as you are suffering from. Okay, another thing that you can do is to practice hygiene. Okay, ensure that, for example, when you go to the latrine, when you come out, wash your hands. When you're preparing food, ensure that you also do the necessary. Ensure that, yeah, the place where you're preparing your food is very clean. and also the food itself it's clean. Okay, another way that we can deal with antibiotic resistance is what our doctors and our nurses or generally the healthcare workers can do for us. And one thing they can do is to avoid overprescription of antibiotics. It is important that, for example, when you go to the hospital, they just don't tell you that when you give your symptoms, they should not immediately just write down the drug that you're supposed to take without carrying out the necessary laboratory test to ascertain that that drug they are going to give you is going to work against the pathogen that is causing an infection in you. Another thing that the healthcare workers can do is that they can sensitize people who visit hospitals on anti- antibiotic resistance. Uh, for example, they can tell them about how the antibiotic resistance spreads and also how ways, various ways that we can avoid antibiotic resistance. And okay, the agricultural sector is it's the main sector that has been spreading antibiotic resistance. So what we can do in the agricultural sector is that first of all we can stop using antibiotics to hasten the growth of our animals. We should stop being greedy. For example, if the animals are supposed to take a certain amount of time before they can be sold, you should accept that and stop going to buy antibiotics that are going to speed up the growth of this livestock so that you can just earn. You're going to be costing everyone a lot. Another thing that we can do in the livestock sector is that we can use vaccines because we know that even animals they suffer from bacterial infections. Instead of waiting for the animals to suffer from these infections, we can give them vaccines to prevent the infections from rising up. Okay, we also have a way in which policymakers, an example of policymaker is the government, what they can do to help in stopping antibiotic resistance. For example, the Kenyan government, they stopped, they gave, they made a policy which prevented the manufacturers of animal feeds from incorporating antibiotics from them in the food. That is one way in which the policymakers can help in this fight. Another way in which policymakers can fight is that they can provide funds to the scientists, for example, to carry out research on the mechanisms of antibiotic resistance and ways in which we can, okay, for example, development of new drugs, vaccines. They should provide funds, that is what I mean. And okay, okay. And for example, another way in which the funds that the policymakers provide is that they can be used to carry out surveillance, whereby this surveillance is going to help us know the level of antibiotic resistance that we are facing, and this way we can be able to develop strategies that are going to help us to deal with it. And like for example, the situation in which we are, there is in as Kenya, we don't have a lot of information concerning antibiotic resistance, so we don't know what is happening. But if, for example, the Kenyan government gave our researchers funds to carry out research, we are going to be able to know, for example, Salmonella typhi, which causes typhoid, it is resistant to this and this and this drug. So we are going to tell our doctors to avoid using these drugs and instead use this one. So that is another way that the government or other policymakers can help us. And finally, what we can do to fight to fight this menace of antibiotic resistance is that our healthcare industry, which involves research and development mainly, they can be really enthusiastic on finding new antibiotics and drugs to fight various bacterial infections, and also they can develop equipment to diagnose various bacterial infections, and they are also required to carry out surveillance frequently so that we can know what we are dealing with. So generally, that's what I had for us today. I hope each of us has learned something small. We should avoid buying over-the-counter drugs. If you feel you're sick, just go to the hospital and the doctor will prescribe the appropriate drug that you're supposed to use. And also when you use the drug, it is also important that ensure you complete the dose. So I want to thank Pint of Science Kenya for giving me this opportunity to talk to all of us and educate each of us. It has been worthwhile. I also learned a lot while I was doing my research. So thank you, and I'd also like to thank everyone who has listened. Thank you for your time, and please put into use what you've learned. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Diana, for your presentation. That was an amazing presentation on antibiotics. Thank you for the insight that you've given us, not to buy over-the-counter drugs. Just because we've Googled something, we just go over and buy something without checking first. Thank you for that presentation. In a few minutes, we're going to welcome Mr. Hudson. Johansson, please take us through.
Hey, thank you so much, Diana, for your presentation. Yeah, it was insightful. I actually learned a lot of things about antibiotics and also antimicrobial resistance, where we experienced that from and the reasons behind why we have antimicrobial resistance. The players include the chemists or the pharmacies that we have, our own personal way of taking medicine, the food that we consume, and also just where we it's like you could say it's like a lifestyle thing. It's becoming a lifestyle thing right now, right? Yeah, great. So it was really great to have you, and I'm hoping that most of our audience have learned and I've learned about all that and would apply like right choices in going forward about what they do, about the choices that they make from day to day. So next we're gonna have Mr. Hudson, and right after this short song, let's play some dance, okay? And we're gonna have Mr. Hudson back. we played it in the beginning, so if you missed it, This is your time to dance. So I'm going to invite all of us to the stage first, to start dancing first. I hope you can listen to my. Diana, you can dance. Hey, welcome. Great. So, welcome back, everyone. So, next we're gonna have Mr. Hudson, and so just to introduce Mr. Hudson to you, Hudson is a Kenyan Rhodes Scholar currently studying a PhD in oncology at the University of Oxford. His research focuses on developing SPCT and PET imaging agents for accurate and early detection of pancreatic ductal adenocarcinoma. Prior to starting his PhD in oncology at Oxford, he graduated from University College London with a Master of Science in Cancer. That was in 2018. He also holds a Bachelor of Technology, Industrial Microbiology and Biotechnology from Technical University of Mombasa. And also that was in 2016. And in 2018, he co-founded Cancer Research Kenya, a nonprofit medical research company that aims to nurture oncology research and cancer education in Kenya. Hudson is also passionate about serving humans diligently. He served as a leader at various levels, including development and charity officers for Linacre College, Oxford, departmental coordinator for Pure and Applied Sciences at the Technical University of Mombasa, and chairman of the ethnic community and a class representative in the same university. At free time, he enjoys mentoring the youth, reading non-fictional books, and doing body workouts. So, Stephanie, you can help me to just bring Hudson on stage. I think your mic is muted.
Yeah, okay. We welcome Mr. Hudson. Your profile is really amazing and it looks really interesting. And I'm really looking forward to what you have in store for us. I hope the rest of us will enjoy what you're going to tell us. Karibu sana, Mr. Hudson.
Could you please confirm if you can hear me well? Can you hear me?
Great, we can hear you, Mr. Hudson. Yeah, you can go ahead.
Okay.
Great.
So
And your presentation.
we have had rehabilitation going on my building here at Oxford, and my Wi-Fi was disconnected. So I'm trying to use my personal hotspot from the phone. So I am Hudson Alakonya, and I'm a Rhodes Scholar from Kenya, currently a second year PhD student here at Oxford. And I am trying to work on a project that aims to solve the chronic problem of pancreatic cancer diagnosis. So as it stands right now, most of the pancreatic cancer patients are diagnosed at late stage, and also the responses to treatment are very dismissal. So my project is trying to see whether we can develop some PET and SPECT imaging agents to enable early detection of pancreatic cancer. So pancreatic cancer, I'll start with the pancreas. So the pancreas is an endodermal organ, and it plays two major functions: the exocrine function, which involves secretion of digestive enzymes as a result of cues from the stomach, and they include trypsin and chymotrypsin, amylase and lipase. And also it plays an endocrine function where it secretes hormones that are responsible for modulating the blood glucose level. Just like other organs of the body, the pancreas is susceptible to developing a number of diseases, and the main known ones are pancreatitis, which involves the inflammation of the pancreas as a result of mostly alcohol consumption. And also the most lethal one is pancreatic cancer, and there are two forms of pancreatic cancer. We have the neuroendocrine tumor, which usually affects the tail of the pancreas, and they account for only less than 5% of the pancreatic cancer cases. And also in terms of treatment, they respond very well to therapies. And then the second one, which is the most ferocious, is pancreatic ductal adenocarcinoma, and it affects majorly the head of the pancreas, and it accounts for more than 90% of all pancreatic cancer cases, and it's usually diagnosed at late stage, and also most of the patients are diagnosed with diseases that are unresponsive to standard therapies. So pancreatic ductal adenocarcinoma, as I've just mentioned in the previous slide, it is the most common form of pancreatic cancer, and it accounts for more than 90% of total cases. And most of the patients who are diagnosed with these diseases have history of obesity, heavy tobacco smoking. Most of them are heavy alcohol consumers, and they are also aged 70 years and above. And also, some of the cases are from families who are born naturally condemned to genetically develop pancreatic cancer. In 2018, it accounted for around 458,000 cases, with almost all of these people dying the same year. And the 5-year survival rate, that is after all these patients have been diagnosed and then they have been placed to treatment. So after 5 years, only 5% of them are likely to be alive. And compared to other cancers, this figure is very, very grim and dismissive. And the reason for this is late diagnosis, and also majority of the patients are unresponsive to the current treatment. So the current diagnostic modalities, are they effective or ineffective? So in terms of diagnosing established diseases, they are effective, and they include the CT scan, MRI scan, and the endoscopic ultrasound. But the problem with the current imaging modalities for pancreatic cancer is they are unable to detect small non-invasive lesions which are less than 1 centimeter. And if we are able to detect the lesions that are very small, they are non-invasive, then the patient is likely to have curable surgery, and we can be able to take the dismissal 5-year survival rate from around 5% to up to around 40%. And so the solution to that is to develop molecular imaging agents to enable early detection of the small lesions. So why molecular imaging? And molecular imaging includes PET imaging, if you have heard of it, and SPECT imaging. So they are exceptionally sensitive. They are able to detect the disease before symptom manifestation. Unlike the CT scan and the MRI and the endoscope ultrasound, usually they detect an already established disease which is in advanced stages. The advantage of molecular imaging technology such as PET scan and SPECT scan is you detect the disease, you detect the molecular changes that occurs prior to symptom manifestation, and that means that you are able to harness this disease at the very early stages, which makes treatment effective and also is likely to be cheaper. The other advantage of molecular imaging modalities is they are non-invasive. So you don't need to obtain a tissue from the patient. You just need to have a molecular imaging agent which you inject into the patient. Then you allow it to localize where the disease is, and then you take the image. And so it's most of the molecular imaging agents are very, very safe. So for we to be able to develop any drug or any imaging agent that can detect the disease, the first thing is we need to know the genetic biology and the pathogenesis, that is the development and progression of the disease. So how does the pancreatic cancer develop? So initially we have the normal pancreatic cancer cells, and then they usually acquire a variety of epigenetic changes and a variety of mutation. The first one is the KRAS mutation, and that transforms the normal pancreata into abnormal one called PANIN1. And then later on, PANIN1 usually acquires CDKN2A mutation to form PANIN2. Panin-1 and Panin-2 are small lesions that occurs naturally in older patients who are above 55 years, and their presence doesn't guarantee that these patients are going to develop pancreatic cancer. So we can't target Panin-1 and Panin-2 for diagnosis because we are likely to have false positives. And then further acquisition of p53 mutation, which is the main tumor suppressor protein, and then SMAD4, we then form Panin-3. And Panin-3 are small, non-invasive lesions around 5 millimeter in size. And these ones, the presence of these Panin-3 lesions is a guarantee that the patient will be developing the invasive or the metastatic or the advanced pancreatic cancer, which accounts for around 450,000 deaths every year. And therefore, if we are able to develop an imaging agent that targets these Panin-3 lesions, then we'll be able to detect them at an early stage. The patients will qualify for surgery, and also they have proved to respond to current therapies. It takes around 5 years for the Panin-3 to transform into the invasive PDAC, which means that we have a window that can allow early diagnosis and also therapeutic intervention. So for it to be able to develop any treatment or any drug or any imaging agent, we need to identify a biomarker that occurs specifically in the disease and not in normal cells. And so we identified a biomarker X. So the project is ongoing. The project has not been published and supposed to adhere to the ethics of research. So I won't go into deep details of the biomarker itself. And the reason being is, as I said, I have to adhere to the ethics of medical research. So we identify biomarker X, which occurs in Panin-3 lesions. And if we are able to target this biomarker X, then we can be able to screen individuals that are susceptible to developing pancreatic cancer. And I mentioned them. So we are not going to screen every individual because the total number of pancreatic cancer cases worldwide is less than 500,000. So if we are going to target everyone, then it means that we are going to waste a lot of money and resources. And then we will only get a lot of negatives. So for it to be able to get the right population, we factor in a lot of stuff. So we need to know at what age do these people develop pancreatic cancer. So at what age are most of the people coming to the hospital and then they are diagnosed with pancreatic cancer? And then what are other confounding factors that contribute to the development of pancreatic cancer? So we saw that obesity is a contributing factor, heavy alcohol consumers, tobacco smoking, and also, as I said, some families whose relatives once had cancer are likely also to, whose families once had pancreatic cancer are likely also to develop pancreatic cancer. And so you factor in all this, and then you are able to identify a population out of 1 million population or 1 billion population. You are able to identify people who are at a high risk of developing pancreatic cancer. And then once you develop the imaging agent, and then you know that at this particular age, around 70, this particular group of people should begin diagnosis. And if they are found with Panin-3, then they'll have surgery. If they are found negative, then you can wait for maybe another 3 years, and then you tell them you should come. And so we identify biomarker X, and now I'm developing small imaging agents targeting biomarker X to use with PET or SPECT camera for imaging pancreatic cancer. So my aims or my project aims were to generate an antibody, which is a monoclonal antibody that targets specifically biomarker X. and also a small binding peptide, which also targets specifically biomarker X with high binding affinities and specificities. So for you to be able to target that biomarker, you need a biomolecule, which when you inject into the patient, it will travel across the tissues and then it identifies biomarker X. And in most cases, we use an antibody or we can use a small binding peptide. The advantages of using an antibody is they have high binding affinities and specificities, and also their pharmacokinetics are well documented. But the problem is because of their large size, they take so long time. They take like 24 hours, 48 hours to be able to reach the target. What does that mean? That the patient has to wait around 48 hours before being imaged. And also, the monoclonal antibodies have got the tendency to interact with the receptors of hepatocellular cells in the liver. And so also the monoclonal antibody is also likely to localize within the liver. And because the pancreatic cancer has got the tendency to accumulate, to metastasize to the liver, it means that if our antibody is also going to the liver, we are going to miss out the metastatic lesions in the liver. And so that is why now the small binding peptide comes in. So they are very small in size, less than 5 kD. They have very improved pharmacokinetics. They take less than 2 hours to reach your target. And also they clear very fast from non-target tissues. And so that is the reason why I am developing 2 molecular imaging agents. One will be monoclonal antibody based, and the other one will be small peptide based imaging agents. And so now you have the monoclonal antibody, which binds specifically to biomarker X. You have the small binding peptide, which also binds specifically to biomarker X. But now, how are you going to see the signal? So the PET camera works by identifying a radiation signal from the body. And we can use radionuclide, such as indium, such as zirconium, and all that. So then you need to conjugate the radiometal to either the antibody or to the small binding peptide. And for you to be able to do that, you need a linker. And then because our biomarker of interest is within the nucleus, you also need a nuclear localization sequence, which will enable the cell membrane penetration and then localization within the nucleus, and then it targets where the biomarker is. And after that, now you have the monoclonal antibody with the signal, which is the radiometal. You inject into the patient, and then you allow the imaging agent to travel and then arrive where the pancreatic cancer is, or where your target is. And then after that, you use the PET camera or the SPECT camera to image the patient. So if you get a signal, then it means that the disease is developing. And then if you don't get any signal, then it means that the patient is healthy. And so you will recommend that he take some time before they come back to the hospital for another diagnosis section. And so in my project, for you to be able to accomplish this, one, you need to characterize pancreatic ductal adenocarcinoma cancer models, and that includes cell lines. So we usually obtain the pancreatic cancer cells from the patients. Of course, I don't do that. We already have them on the market, and then we usually culture them in the lab. And then we also need the mouse models. So we usually use the animal mice for studies. So before you take any drug to the patient, you must characterize its toxicity and its efficacy in animals, and in most cases we use the mouse models. And then after that, so I have already characterized my cell lines, I've already characterized my mouse models, and also I have already validated the antibody that targets biomarker X. I have also validated the small peptide that targets biomarker X. And then the next thing is I need to radiolabel my antibody, which is the IgG, and then the peptide with the radiometal, which is the signal that we will detect if you inject that antibody into the patient to be able to observe whether the cancer is developing. And then after that, I need to characterize the suitability of the radiolabel antibody and then radiolabel peptide in imaging the pancreatic cancer, that is in PDAC cell lines and then in mouse models. So at the end of my PhD, I will have proved that the radiolabel antibody and the radiolabel peptide can aid in detecting biomarker X in pancreatic cancer, and then the recommendation will be, can we go and try it in clinical trials? So the whole process takes from characterization of cell line models to validation of the vector, and then to taking that to the patient. So that means that now we have proved that these imaging agents are safe and they are effective for human use. The whole process takes around 8 to 10 years. My PhD just takes only 4 years. So that means that we will also have another 4 years of research on the same imaging agents before we can do it, before we can take them to the patients. So at this stage, as I told you, like, there's a lot of science here, and I think I was told to try to be simple, and I have tried to be simple as much as I can, and that is all I had. So in summary, for you to be able to diagnose a particular patient with a particular disease, one, we need to know at what stage is the right stage for diagnosing this patient. So at what stage will this patient respond to treatment better? At what stage can these patients qualify for surgery? Because surgery is the main form of cancer treatment. We know very well that most of the chemotherapies are very cytotoxic and they harm patients. So if we are able to excise the tumor with surgery, I think that is more ideal and more safer than chemotherapy. And then, so how do we develop the imaging agents? One, we need to identify a biomarker that only occurs within the cancer and not in health cells. And then after that, we can develop a monoclonal antibody-based or a peptide-based imaging agent targeting the biomarker, and then you evaluate the suitability of those imaging agents in cell line models, that is in vitro, in the lab, and then also in mouse models. And then if it works, then now we can move to phase 1 clinical trials, phase 2 clinical trials, phase 3 clinical trials. And if it proves to be effective and safe, then now we can approve it for human use. So we don't want to take anything to the patient which is likely to harm the patient. So that is all I had for you guys. And of course, I have to thank my supervisor, Professor Bart Cornelsen, for his support and guidance, assisted by Professor Eric O'Neill and all these lab group members who have been supportive beyond efficient. So thank you also to the Pint of Science Kenya for giving me a chance to talk to you. I had to try my best to be very simple as I can, and I hope you guys, you enjoyed this and you learned something from it. If you have any question, feel free to ask before I will be asked to log out. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Hudson, thank you so much for your presentation. That was really amazing and so eye-opening. Thank you
You're welcome.
for helping us understand more about pancreatic cancer through and everything that you've learned. And I was wondering, you said that mostly pancreatic cancer mostly develops in adults above.
Yeah, 70. I think I lost you. Can you hear me?
Of 50.
Okay,
Have you
great.
heard me?
So I think
No, 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 no.
Stephanie would like
Hold
to
on.
ask if children develop pancreatic cancer. You can hear me.
Yeah, could you pardon me, please?
Okay, so Stephanie, can you go ahead? You're interested now.
Yeah. Can you hear me now? I'm asking, according to your
Yes.
explanation, you said that there's a particular part where the pancreas, there's a way it produces some kind of cells,
Yeah.
of which you mentioned that every person at a certain age develops such kind of cells in their pancreas.
Yeah.
Is that so?
Yeah.
So my question is, can children develop pancreatic cancer now that those cells only develop in people above the age of 50?
Yeah. So at this point, so this was the. Can you see the screen, right? This was the pathogenesis of pancreatic cancer. That is the development of pancreatic cancer from transformation of the normal cells to malignant one. And as I told you, it is a multi-stage and it entails acquisition of various genetic abnormalities, of which we start with the KRAS, which is an oncogene that promotes the uncontrolled division of cells. And then further acquisition of CDKN2NM mutation, which is a tumor suppressor protein, leads to PAN91 and PAN92. So these two lesions, they are common in individuals aged 55 years and above, and they are not problematic. They don't cause any symptoms. They don't cause any problem to the patients. I think I can say like it's just a way of most people's pancreatic cancer cells aging. But if the PAN92 develops to PAN93, then you are at risk of developing pancreatic cancer. You get it?
Ah, okay. Thank you. Yes, I totally get it. Thank
Have you?
you. Thank you for explaining
Okay.
that so
Okay.
well.
So, okay. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Wow, Hudson, it's interesting. Yeah, and all the technology behind it. Yeah, and also like helpful for the current cases for pancreatic cancer, especially in early detection of pancreatic cancer for our country, Kenya. So we are proud to have you. Yeah.
Okay.
Uh,
Thank you.
so,
Thank you.
great. So thank you so much, Hudson, for, and also thank you so much, our listeners, for taking your time to listen to the second presentation tonight from Hudson. And so let's take a break. And at 8 p.m., we're going to be happening with Luke Halo. They are from Kenya, and he'll be talking to us about it. Well, so the last theme we're having tonight is "Take Me Out." Yeah, great. So Stephanie, you could lead us to a break.
Yes, so I
Yeah.
think we've done so many dances. I think we've done enough dances. I hope I don't know if you guys still want to dance. Johansson, you can put for us some music so that
What
people
do we?
can dance. But I promise you that is the last thing we're doing today. Tomorrow we'll think of other things to do.
Okay.
So Johansson, please put for
Tomorrow
us
we
a
have
little bit of
games.
music.
So, thank you.
Tomorrow?
Yeah. Tomorrow we're having games and quizzes. Okay.
Oh yeah,
So
true.
tomorrow,
Yeah, by the way, yeah. Tomorrow we are having games, so it will be more lively and
yeah,
yes. It won't be
from
for those who
7:30
don't enjoy
p.m.
dancing. I'm sorry for this, but please enjoy it
Great.
now. Johansson, please put for us some music so that we can dance.
Okay. Before we do some music,
Uh
want
huh.
to share my screen so everyone please tweet using hashtag Pint20 on Twitter, yeah, and Facebook and on Instagram, yeah. And so let us
Yes.
look at what's happening with Pint20 right now.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so as we load this, let us enjoy some music. Great. Welcome back, everyone. So, Stephanie's going to be back soon, and she's going to continue helping me to co host. And right now, we're moving to the last bit of our talk tonight. And this is going to happen. Um, in just 2 minutes, I'm going to introduce our next speaker. So Stephanie back on stage, and I'm going to read the bio of our next speaker. And Stephanie, you're going to help me to introduce our next speaker. So Luke is a human-computer interaction software engineer specializing in multimedia systems in the School of Computing and Information Technology, Technical University of Kenya. He's also a researcher in next-generation computing technologies, specializing in mixed reality and artificial intelligence. He's also consulting at Africa Archive as a digital repository technologist. Great. So welcome so much, Mr. Luke.
Johansson, good evening.
Oh, great. Wow. So you can hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, great. Yeah, so I think music was still on while I was doing the introduction. So
fantastic.
let me just go ahead.
Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Okay, so welcome for the last talk tonight from Luke Okello. Luke is a human-computer interaction software engineer specializing in multimedia systems in the School of Computing and Information Technology in Technical University of Kenya. He's also a researcher in next-generation computing technologies, specializing in mixed reality and artificial intelligence. And to add on that, he's also consulting at Africa Archive as a digital repository technologist. Great. So thank you so much, Mr. Hudson. Let me see if Stephanie's back. If she ain't, you just take the floor and go ahead. Great. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Johansson. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, you're clear.
Good. Good evening to the viewers of Pint of Science. It's actually a great pleasure to be here, and thank you so much as well to my good friend Johansson, for inviting me. So without much further ado, I'm going to share my screen. I have a very short presentation for us. Can I do that?
Yes, please.
Okay. Good. Can you see my screen? Sorry, I'm not sure whether you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you, and your screen is also visible.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so without much further ado, I'm very grateful for this opportunity to share with us a little bit of background about what I do as a computer software engineering technologist or software engineering scientist. And my talk actually is entitled Something Interesting is Happening. So something interesting is happening within the continent of Africa, but also specifically within Kenya. So this is going to be a case study on the effects of COVID-19 and maybe the future that we're going to see happening very shortly post-pandemic, once this pandemic has been declared, maybe not over officially, but maybe it's been declared manageable or something like that. So again, as Johansson has said, I work within the Technical University of Kenya, where I'm a multimedia systems software engineer, and I'm also a computer science researcher within the area of next generation computer technologies, specifically mixed reality computer technologies, and that's talking about artificial intelligence combined with virtual reality and augmented reality. But also I work on a consultant basis with several other organizations, including one which I'll talk about possibly at the end of this very short presentation, by the name of Africa Archives. That's actually where I work with. I'm privileged. I'm privileged to work with Johansson there. So within Africa Archives, I'm a software engineering researcher, and I'm also a digital repository technician. So basically, as you can see, I have a computer science and information technology background, and it's been for quite a number of years now. I won't say how many years because I don't want you to know my age. Okay, so on to the talk for tonight. Something interesting is happening, and the case study in Kenya is, can COVID-19 help science fiction turn into science fact? Now, what am I talking about? Here we have an overview of what is commonly known as the 8 Millennium Development Goals as laid out, and you'll be able to find these in many of the United Nations and other similar type of, should I call them apolitical organizations. And they're quite ambitious, as you can see. They are talking about, can we end world hunger? They're asking, can we eliminate world poverty? They also want to know, can we cure all sickness and disease? And can we give equal access to education? And they also want to promote gender equality, empower women, reduce child mortality, improve maternal health, and ensure there's environmental sustainability, and develop, of course, a global partnership. So as you can see, all these goals are quite ambitious. I would expect nothing less of the human race. And all these goals are actually not yet fully achieved. Some of them are, but the rest are not. So it's quite interesting when we ask ourselves from a computer science point of view, what does the Millennium Development Goals have to do with technology, particularly computer technology? Or what is the role of computer technology in trying to meet and solve some of these Millennium Development Goals? Now, you might not immediately see the direct connection between the Millennium Development Goals and the technology. But also, please note, this talk is not about the Millennium Development Goals. This talk is about the area of computer science and technologies, making a better world for tomorrow. That might include the development goals, but it might also not. It could include better things, you know. So I also want to share this very interesting thought with you. There's a very well-known gentleman by the name of Mr. Tom Goodwin. Now, Mr. Tom Goodwin, about 10 years ago, roughly, he came up with a very interesting summary of the developments that we have seen in technology over the past 10 years up until today, presently. And many of you, I'm sure, Pint of Science audience will be familiar with this very famous quotation from Mr. Tom Goodwin, where he says, Bitcoin is the world's biggest bank, but it does not actually have any real physical money. And he said, Uber is the world's largest taxi company, but they don't actually own any vehicles. He went on further to say Facebook is the world's largest and most popular media owner, but they do not actually create any content that is either video or audio and stored by them. Alibaba, some of you I know are familiar with that, is the world's most valuable e-commerce retailer, but they actually don't have any large stock and inventory that they keep within their own, what you'd call under their own location or under their own domain. And finally, Airbnb, again, familiar to many of us here, the world's largest accommodation provider, but they own no real estate. Now, why is this very interesting to us? It's interesting to us because previously, what I'm calling previously on science fiction, all of those companies that I've just mentioned now, Facebook, Airbnb, Uber, Alibaba, and there are quite a number that obviously have not been mentioned there. They did not exist possibly 20 years ago, so many of them are quite recent, having existed in the past 10 to 15 years. And more importantly, they've gone ahead to break all the previously all the limits that were previously there, I should say it that way, in terms of, for example, who would ever have thought that we no longer have to physically deal with shops that are not brick and mortar? You understand what I mean? A physical shop where you go to, such as your supermarket, or such as even the bank. I would even dare say, such as religious places of worship now. All those have, in the past 10 to 15 years, they no longer exist within one location, but they are spread out widely and online as well. So before, that was previously considered a myth scientifically and business-wise, as well as the fact that who would have ever thought the world would become more personalized? It's possible today through data to know what are the thoughts and behaviors and patterns of millions of different types of users who live in different parts of the country, all over or different parts of the world, and they're all spread out. That before was for a businessman or for a shop owner or for somebody who was involved in commerce, it was considered almost impossible. So that was another scientific myth. And previously, before, it was thought that the world was not connected in terms of communication. And we know mobile phones have disproven that myth quite considerably the past 10, 15 years. And the 21st century economy was not something that was very well defined. Nobody was sure, how do you make money in the 21st century? What does it look like? It seemed that each country had their own system, and each country around the world had their own different approaches to business and trade and banking, etc., etc. But we know today that the 21st century economy is global, more so now with this pandemic, COVID-19. And last but not least, a lot of the tech, software and hardware, and the tech in terms of human labor was not being built and customized to fulfill the needs of the African market. Now that's quite astounding, given the fact that, as you'll see later on, Africa has had for a long time one of the top 5 largest populations globally in the world, in comparison to our brothers and sisters in Western nations. So what are we discovering? We're discovering that what Tom Goodwin said about something interesting is happening has actually been a process that has taken place over time. As you can see from this list over here, it's interesting to note that in the past 10 years, we have seen new technologies that not only were not in existence before 10 years ago, but they have actually become irreplaceable. We can't imagine life without them. Now, what makes this interesting is because these technologies are performing at a greater expectation level than what was considered possible before. I can give the example of the mobile phone data interconnectivity, what all of us now know as 4G. Just possibly 5 to 10 years ago, we were considering 4G as being quite a distance off from us, especially here in Africa. But that's not the case today. Today, many of the urban and rural centers in Africa have access to 4G and indeed 4G LTE, which stands for long-term evolution. We also have the edge technologies, cloud, artificial intelligence, big data. We also have the smart TVs. Now, these are terms which, again, 10 years ago were totally unfamiliar to a large percentage of the population here on our continent. Of course, I'm aware that you have viewers from all over the globe tuning in tonight, but it's quite interesting. We here have gotten familiar with some of these terminologies on this list that you can see here only in the past 5 to 10 years. Tech trackers, electronic vehicles, self-driving cars, artificial or rather augmented reality, virtual reality, smart speakers like Google Home, Google Mini, Amazon Alexa, and of course Apple Siri, wireless earbuds, the sharing economies like Uber and like Lyft and like Airbnb, and the non-traditional centric keyboard. So the Kenyan case study is quite interesting when you talk about it, because we have to ask ourselves the question, how did all this science move from being fiction to fact in a very short space and amount of time for our people, of whom, for example, in Kenya, 75% of the population is under the age of 35. And that is a huge, large number of young people like my friend Johansson and our co-host Stephanie. So you can imagine that these under 35 were introduced to Uber, Bitcoin, Facebook, Alibaba, Airbnb, Instagram, and TikTok, and the likes of that, all within the past 5 years. Just only in 5 years, and the market has grown exponentially here. I mean, Africa and Kenya in particular, and of course West Africa and Nigeria, is a dream for these technology companies. So all of this, of course, we know is thanks to what we call emerging technologies. Now, I hope this slide is not too tiny for you to see. I can try and increase the magnification a little bit. So an emerging technology basically can be defined as a new technology that is currently being developed or has been developed roughly in the past 5 to 10 years. It's changed how we do business. It's changed how we do life socially. It's changed our status quo, either making us do business better or making us live our lives with a better quality. And these emerging technologies are generally not new, but they could be technologies that have been repurposed and they were there previously before, but now they have been put to a better use. If you look at this list here, when you speak about Uber and Bitcoin, for example, these are things that have been around, let's say, since the beginning of time, money and transportation, you know, but through science, technology, and particularly computer information technology, we have now invented, I should say, more effective ways of giving people the same old technology, but in a way that is more relevant and impactful. So emerging technologies tend to be very new in terms of the concept, but not in terms of the raw material, like I've said before. They grow very fast and they always have a prominent impact. Of course, here in Africa or in Kenya in particular, we would not imagine what life would be like without Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, for example. So you can see that's a very fast growth rate only over the past 5 to 10 years. And it's totally amazing. So this is very interesting in the context of industrial revolution. My theory tonight is that the first, second, third, and fourth industrial revolutions, as you can see laid out on the screen there, they were, by far and large, they left out Africa for very many different reasons. Of course, we have our colonial history, and of course, we have the revolutions or what the imperial colonial history, what took place after the colonialism took place. So when we speak about industrial revolution and their connection to emerging technology and their connection as well to the changes that we're going to see, the argument becomes very interesting because where Africa would be right now is actually in the third and fourth industrial revolution. In other words, we bypassed and we skipped, if I could put it that way, we bypassed and we skipped the first and the second industrial revolution, and we found ourselves right in the middle of the third revolution and in between the third and the fourth revolution. Now, the third and the fourth revolution, we're talking about, of course, digital. We're talking about the internet, the personal computer, talking about the smartphones that are so prevalent everywhere. But also, moving on to the fourth industrial revolution, we're talking about robotics. We're speaking about artificial intelligence. We're talking about augmented reality. We're talking about virtual offices and virtual workspaces. So again, these were all things that were scientific myths before, like in the time of, let's say, our grandparents, or in the time of their parents, certainly, around the Second World War taking place here in Africa. But in the generation, what we call the millennial generation, we have now people who are more conversant with how to get on the internet and take pictures of themselves than they are with going to the market to do business and sell, cash crops so that they can make a living. Now, that's quite interesting. What are we saying then? We're saying that the fourth industrial revolution has actually started in Africa and in many countries of Africa, just that we're not recognizing it. Now, let's dig into the Kenyan. I just have possibly 2 or 3 minutes, then I'm done. Within the Kenyan homeostasis, we want to consider what was life like before the pandemic here in Kenya in 2020. March is when we had our first case of coronavirus reported here in Kenya. And since then, we're still under lockdown, as I'm sure very many of your viewers for Pint of Science are. But take a look at these very interesting stats. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, 75% of Kenyan population are under the age of 35. That's a huge number. Okay, I can tell you that I am not in that category. Secondly, we have a literacy rate in Kenya of 88%. That means that these are people who can read, write, and they can perform some type and level of arithmetic. Thirdly, within Kenya, annually we graduate over 1 million graduates. And as I said earlier before, I'm based at the Technical University of Kenya. And I guarantee you that despite even this pandemic, we are expecting large numbers of students to graduate this year in December, God willing, if everything goes well. And lastly, before the pandemic, 35% of those who are under the age of 35 years were unemployed. Now, these are people who have access to the third and fourth industrial revolution tools, which we're talking about now. But of course, there's been a slight shift since the pandemic. We have quite a number who are jobless, 4.7 million. And out of that, probably 1 million of them are youths, people under the age of 35. And probably 500,000 more people are set to lose their jobs between now and December. Now, is this a gloomy picture? Well, it depends on how you want to look at it. My argument tonight to your audience is that Africa has a very good probability, a very good chance of emerging as a smart, interconnected continent post-COVID-19. Take a look at all the things that have happened in Kenya alone. This pandemic was declared. First of all education has been shifted online, both for private and public schools. Secondly, work from home has become the new normal, what we call virtual offices. Thirdly, a large number of our urban population has migrated from the urban to the rural. So our cities have effectively been decongested just in the past 5 to 6 months. This is a new type of 21st century economy where the human labor has moved across to what you'd call the village. And fourth and fifth, of course, is that white collar jobs have now shifted to blue collar. Everybody has discovered a love for farming. And there's a lot of agricultural technology innovation taking place. And lastly, we have shifted from predominantly using paper money to now using virtual currency. And that was the case before in Kenya anyway, and in many African countries. But I think now it's here to stay and it will play an even bigger role. So the question, as I leave you tonight, is could what we're seeing post-COVID-19 be the start of the fourth industrial revolution in Kenya? Right now, my own theory is that we are at what I call the pre-emergence of the fourth industrial revolution. Some statistics there for you. 85% of 43 million people in Kenya have 3G connection or higher. And we have robust fiber network interconnectivity. We have mobile connection of more than 46 million people. Internet penetration is at its highest level ever of 89.7%. And the average city internet speed is 10.1 megabytes. So in summary, we have reached a situation where, let me stop sharing this. We have reached a situation where the ball is firmly in the court of the under 35. people like Johansson and myself, Johansson and Stephanie, sorry, not me. And what we're expecting, or rather what I'm expecting, is that there's going to be an explosion of Moore's law being put to the test. Those of you who are familiar with Moore's law, it says every 2 years there's a doubling of the speed, the interconnectivity, and the development of hardware and software. We're going to see an explosion of that. We're also going to see quite possibly new jobs being created that were not there before in the post-COVID-19 economy, as we begin to enter the pre-emergent phase of the fourth industrial revolution. I think some very interesting times ahead for us. And that is the end of my short presentation, I hope. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luke. That was really interesting. Yeah, to find out that we can not at any cost do away with margin technologies, and it's going to overtake us. Definitely, it's all around us. Like right now, it's penetrated much into the villages, like you said, and no, you don't have to go to the city to have most of your work done. You can do it. Internet is at home, and the right technologies are also quite spread around the country. Even though there's some places which are not privileged to have that yet, but at the base of things right now, things they will be at I would say like an average level in terms of technology. Great, and so also you pointed out that technology. Or there's going to be job loss, but maybe there's also going to be job creation. When you look at, I think you can just respond to this as we close. Is artificial intelligence and machine learning are they going to create more jobs than they're going to take away in terms of creating those technologies? Yeah, because when there is machine learning and artificial intelligence, it means that there's less labor required, or there's less human physical involvement required. Yeah, so the machine is doing all the work. Yeah, and so does it mean that there's going to be more jobs lost than created, or more jobs created than lost? So I'm gonna have is this going to be an answer there, or is this going to be a nightmare for the labor force? Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Johansson, for that question. It's a very interesting question. I must tell you, I think here in Africa, what I'm projecting to see is that there will not initially be a great amount of job loss, given the fact that our economies are differently structured in comparison to the Western nations, of whom a lot of those technologies were predominantly started and created there, and therefore they have been able to absorb them into the fabric of their society without also unnecessarily creating a high amount of job loss. So for us, we are still getting to grips with these technologies, and therefore, for example, self-driving cars in Africa, in Kenya, for example, they might not yet take the job of the bus driver, or they might not yet take the job of the taxi driver, because our economies are slightly structured in a different way, where the human labor is at the center of the jobs that we have to offer, but also our infrastructure, road infrastructure, mapping, geolocation infrastructure, they have not yet quite reached the level where we can put our life in the hands of the artificial intelligence technology.
Oh, great. Thank you. And there's still hope, but it also calls for us to be creative or innovative and find a way how we're going to position ourselves so that we don't get disadvantaged when artificial intelligence and all machine learning flood or overwhelm our economy in a few years. Great. So glad to have you, and it's been a really great night and great learning from our speaker, Luke Okello, and we hope to have you again soon. Great.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pint of Africa, Pint of Science. And thank you so much, Johansson, and to Stephanie as well. I'll be happy to see you next time.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, beloved viewers, today was a really great time. And if you worked through from beginning to now, well, you must be tired. But we are glad that you joined, tuned in, invited your friends, and had some interactive time with our speakers tonight. So we're glad that we had Diana Kinua, Mr. Hudson Alakonye, and Mr. Luke Okello. We, as Pint of Science Kenya, we say thank you so much to our speakers for joining us tonight and for presenting to us really important research information that is relatable to our audience, and so that we can learn, make better choices, and strengthen our trust in research and in science. Great. And also provoke our interest in science. Great. So tonight we're going to close the show, and we would like to have you tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. East African time. And tomorrow it's going to be structured differently. We're going to have so many people on stage to ask some questions and allow you to answer those questions also on stage or on the chat in Facebook and YouTube. So tune in tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. We're gonna have an hour of questions and answers, and a lot of fun for closing the Pint of Science Kenya Festival online 2020. And also, you're welcome to be part of our community at Pint of Science Kenya on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Yeah, so you can search for us at Pint of Science KE for Kenya, and you will find us, and we welcome you to be part of our community. And if you're interested to be to join our community or speakers, also contact us through our social media platforms. And if you're interested in volunteering as a university student or as a science enthusiast, you're also welcome to contact us in our social media handles, and we will respond to you, and we will be glad to have you on board to take forward the science community in Kenya. Great. So as we close tonight, Stephanie, perhaps you're gonna say something if you're back online. And if not, we're gonna close with the dance and say goodbye. Kwaheri for now, and kwaheri for now, and tupatane kesho jioni hapo. Okay, so stay tuned. Look at our social media handles for tomorrow's streaming online live from 7:30 p.m. Okay, bye. Bye.